Hello class, so today we're starting to cover how it is that we're understanding Stoicism. First we're going to look at Marcus Aurelius and also a website titled What's the Best Way to Live? So essentially there's a great tradition in philosophy and in literature in general of offering us prescriptions on how to live the best life, how to lead a good life, right? So we also see this framed in a typical and popular question in terms of how should I live my life, right? Or even what career should I pursue? So nowadays, such questions are relegated to self-help books, right? So yet, even as we ask, what's my career path, we must not be accustomed to we might not be accustomed to question, how do I live such a life, right? Heading toward that career and how to live once I have that career. So in the context we're in right now, also in this place, in other words, the classroom, is to be asking such questions. In other words, in an academic and educational context, yet to ask such questions also has to do with choice, right? So how do I make such choices? How will such choices affect me? How will such choices affect my sphere of relations? And also extending to the sphere of relations beyond our personal circle, and of course extending to our relations with the environment, the wider world, nature, etc. So as indicated in What's the Best Way to Live online article, such questions are bound together with the common end goal of living a life that's aimed toward happiness. So such a philosophy of living is eudaimonic, right? A life lived toward eudaimonia, right? So as we know, defining happiness can be transient and elusive, yet once we're able to see that a strong emotional component to our life is important, that is linked to feeling good, having good quality of life, a sense of well-being and feelings of satisfaction, etc., in living toward that good, we must also acknowledge that a happy life is also synonymous with an ethical life, right? To be an ethical person is also to be, in general, to be geared toward well-being, right? The well-being of others, the environment, oneself, etc. Okay? So, yet at the same time, life is not always happiness and ease, right? Which is why people turn to therapy, religion, and of course, philosophy. So when we turn to philosophy, one of the best sources to turn to is the ancient Greeks, right? Namely with the best example of Plato and Socrates, right? Who is famous for pointing out that the unexamined life is not worth leading. So actually, Socrates becomes the best example and role model for the ancients, right? While he was alive, and with obvious inspiration for Plato, and extending to after his death with Epicureanism, Cynicism, the Stoics. So for example, in terms of what we're examining here today. So with all these philosophical approaches, reasoning is essentially our highest virtue. So here's what we'll turn to elaborate more on Stoicism. The founder of Stoicism was Greek, Zeno of Citium. He was born in 334 BC and died in 262 BC. So yet most of what we read today is from the later Roman Stoics, namely Marcus Aurelius. And there's also Seneca, who was born in 4 BC and died in 65 AD. Marcus Aurelius's dates are Marcus Aurelius, he was born in 121 AD and died in 180 AD. So with Stoicism, we need to grasp onto a few preliminary ideas, primary ideas, right? The first has to do with compatibilism. So with metaphysics, we study the relationship between free will and determinism, right? There are philosophers who favor either side of the debate between the two. Those who place primary importance on free will alone, and those types of philosophers who are known as who are known in terms of the metaphysical position of libertarianism, not to be mistaken for the political form of libertarianism we talk about today with conservatives and the like. So there are those who favor the deterministic viewpoint, where the outlook is strictly based on natural law. So regardless of free will, this is, by the way, not to be mistaken for fatalism, right? Then there's the metaphysical position of compatibilism. This is the recognition of a balance between the two, compatibilism, okay? So the two types of metaphysical approaches, in other words, the deterministic outlook and likewise free will, are compatible. So yes, we follow natural law, logos, in terms of how it is that we're understanding the logical reasoning of things, yet we are also free to do so by way of our own free will. This is where the Stoics are, okay? So in other words, Stoics are compatibilists, okay? Oftentimes they're mistaken for determinists, yet that's not the case. So this is the metaphysical aspect of Stoicism. Then there's the additional way in which we need to understand Stoicism, and that is through the tripartite structure of logos, ethos, and physics, okay? So logos runs first and foremost in the triad by way of reason. So there's the reason of the cosmos, there's the way in which we access the world through our naturally endowed reason, and so it's important to see this as natural and innate reasoning that we are born with. And yet there's the rule of physics and or nature. So the Stoics often claimed that we live in accordance to nature is to be virtuous. So to live in accordance with nature is virtuous for the Stoic. And this means to live in accordance with our innate reasoning and likewise the order of nature and the cosmos at large, including our community with others, with nature. And then there's ethos. To live accordingly to our own rational nature also means to practice life in relation to ourselves and others and in our environment. This must be ethical first and foremost if we are living rationally, okay? Then, tied closely to the tripartite scenario, takes us to the main aspect of free will. The tripartite structure takes us to the main aspect of free will for the Stoic in relation to logos, reason. We must see the value of rational choice in terms of freedom. So a Stoic practices his or her philosophy by managing rational choice itself. This is a management of choice in terms of what we are able to control by way of our free will, and what we cannot control in terms of determinism. So the focus should always be rationally considered with what we control, remaining indifferent with what we cannot control. So this is the central point to think of in terms of control and choice for the Stoic. In other words, we are choosing to not be overwhelmed with that which we cannot control, and likewise seeking to have a reasonable sense of how it is that we understand that which we are in control of. Okay, so also remind yourself that the Stoic does not cut out emotion, as he or she rationally controls emotion, okay? This is the common misunderstanding of what a Stoic is. In other words, we often think of Stoicism in terms of someone who is emotionless, and we must see that Stoics are actually those who are in control of their emotions to the degree that they allow themselves to have their emotion, but they are not letting the emotion get out of hand in an impassioned sense, right? So in terms of the Stoic, we are always centered on what we are able to control while not getting overwhelmed by what we cannot control. This is the centerpiece of Stoic behavior, and it's obviously ethical as much as it's playing a part in the larger whole of logos, the logical structure of things, right, and nature. Also, obviously then, the natural order of things in terms of the rational and the good. So let's go ahead and look at our quote from Marcus Aurelius's meditation from book 7, and it's meditation number 55, okay? So when I'm reading this, what you're always trying to grapple with is how it is that we're understanding this tripartite structure by way of what Marcus Aurelius is pointing out in the meditation, okay? So I'm gonna read it. So this is Marcus Aurelius, and it's a selection from his book, Meditations. His book, Meditations, was basically a way that he was offering Stoic advice for himself and also posterity by way of, just simply writing down Stoic thoughts, because he was trained as a Stoic in his, to be a Stoic emperor, more or less, a Roman Stoic emperor. So we're looking at meditation 55. So look not around you to discover the principles other men live by, but look instead directly at nature, both at the nature that surrounds you through the things which happen to you, and your own nature through the actions which you take. Every being ought to do what is according to its nature. All other things have been constituted for the sake of rational beings, just as among non-rational beings, the inferior are for the sake of the superior. But rational beings are for the sake of one another. The first principle, then, in man's nature is his social obligations to others of his kind. And second is not to yield to impulses of the body, for it is the particular nature of the rational and intelligent being to control itself, and never be overpowered either by the motion of the senses or the appetites, for both are animal. The intelligent being claims superiority and does not permit itself to be overpowered by the others, and with good reason, for it is formed by nature to use all of them. The third principle of the rational nature is to be free from self-delusion and deception. Let then reason hold fast to these three principles and go straight forward, and it will fulfill its nature. So the challenge there is to recognize, first of all, that when you look closely at what he's pointing out there, he is pointing out a way in which we could be better Stoics. So you're always understanding that you're providing a context for the way in which Marcus Aurelius is giving us or offering us a prescription on how to be the best Stoic. And so when you look at what he writes there, he's offering that tripartite structure in terms of ethics, and then likewise in terms of physics, in other words, nature, and then also in terms of reason or logos. So in other words, what you're tasked to do is figure out what in the meditation is implied in terms of how it is that we're understanding reason. And then likewise, how is it that Marcus Aurelius is implying ethos through what he's pointing out in terms of meditation number 55? And then likewise, how is he also paying heed to nature? Okay, so I want you to think about those things, take it from there, and we'll talk more soon. Thank you, bye-bye.